Hello my friends and welcome back to my channel. Well, today's video is not a reading vlog. I didn't vlog last week. I kept thinking I'm gonna wait until I finish this book and then I'll pick something and then I'll kind of form my vlog around that type of book, and then I just kind of was reading a bunch of random books that were parts of a series, and I feel like those books are harder to vlog about because it's like, well, this is book 4 in a series anyway. So I thought that instead of doing that, I would just read and just do a weekly reading wrap up. So that's what I have today. I have 5 books that I read. That's all the books that I read last week, and we're just going to talk about them real quick. So here we go. So the first book that I read last week was To Sir Philip with Love by Julia Quinn. This is part of the Bridgerton series. This is book number 5. This is book number 5. And this follows Eloise Bridgerton, who is one of the siblings, obviously, and it is her romance. So this is a historical romance, I'm sure you all know. I feel like everybody has read these, especially if they have any interest in historical romance. There was a big readathon last year that was happening around this time, and I think most people read them. So this book follows Eloise, and she's sort of at the age where she's becoming a spinster. She's 28 years old. She has rejected some marriage proposals. She hasn't really found anything that she wanted because she really, really wanted to marry for love, and she was not ready to commit to somebody if she didn't think it was going to be a love match. And so she is at this point very fond of writing letters, and she has been corresponding with the husband of her cousin, Marina. Now, Marina married Philip. They had young children, and then she passed away. The story of her passing is very, very tragic, and it was an attempted suicide. She attempted to just drown herself. Philip actually happened to see her, pulled her out of the ocean, and then it was complications from, like, it sounds like it was maybe like pneumonia or something like that she caught from being in the cold ocean, and that was what killed her. And Philip has really struggled a lot with her death, and specifically with the way that she died, that it was an attempted suicide, but also very, very much he is struggling with the fact that Marina had depression. It's never mentioned on page. Obviously, they didn't have diagnoses for things at that time, and it looks like it's unclear if it was postpartum. I mean, obviously it was partly postpartum, but also her children were past the postpartum age, so Marina really suffered from depression, and that played a huge role in the happiness in their family, and Philip really, really struggled with that. He struggled to want to be a father and to want to be a good husband because of just the sadness that was constantly surrounding Marina, and so he is determined that he needs to find a wife, but she needs to be someone who is happy, someone who can be happy and who can take care of the children. He ends up just corresponding with Eloise. They write letters back and forth for a very long time, and he eventually suggests the idea that they marry. And Eloise, at this point, her best friend Penelope has just gotten married, and she is sort of feeling all alone, and she thinks, I have this really good relationship with Philip. We've been writing letters. We know each other really well. I'm just going to go out there and see him, and maybe I'll marry him, So she leaves without her whole family realizing where she's going. She goes out there. Her intention is to meet him and to decide if that's going to be something that she wants to do. But in her mind, she really imagines she's going to marry Philip. So it's basically their romance. There are a lot of complications with her family and with the children. He is obviously a single dad, and I really, really enjoyed I loved Eloise's relationship with the children. I loved how fiery she was. I loved how she was one of those type of heroines who is not going to let anything hold her back, and she's ready to just sort of embrace new opportunities and just do her best, and I thought that she was a fantastic heroine. I really loved her. I loved the very slow build of her relationship with Philip. I thought it was really beautiful. I really, really enjoyed it. I think that I did end up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars, and that's largely just because there was such a big emphasis placed on how Marina's depression affected her family members, specifically Philip. He had such a negative association of her, and specifically that, what he calls sadness, that depression just affected him so much, as it does, right? I think that people who have depression, or people that have mental illness or mental health issues, they are very much aware of how that affects the people that they are closest to. And that is definitely a major cause of concern for them, because they don't want to be be seen or felt as a burden. So it was really, honestly, I really didn't love how that was portrayed here. I felt like the author really leaned into Philip and vocalizing that yes, Marina was a burden and it was very difficult and I didn't like being married to her because of the depression. And that really, honestly, I felt was just really, really sad. I mean, as someone who, I have depression, I have a history of mental health issues in my family, and it is a difficult thing to deal with, you know? And so it was maybe a little too close to home, and it was definitely something that I was very sensitive to, but I would say that this is, out of the 5 that I've read, I haven't finished the series yet, this one is my least favorite so far, for sure, and it's really entirely because of that. I also feel like this, but again, a 4-star read is still a good book for me, you know? Like, I still really enjoyed it, but I feel like the tone of this book was pretty different from the others in that it was very heavy. It was really pretty sad. It was honestly just a little demoralizing, and Eloise was really the bright spot in this book, and obviously the siblings, like the Bridgerton siblings, when they get involved, that was wonderful. I love them so much. So this is my least favorite Bridgerton book that I've read so far, but it's still a 4-star read. Like, I love this series. I love this family. I think Julia Quinn, I feel like these are really comforting, fun, safe reads for the most part, although you do also see that she deals with heavier topics in there. In almost all of her books that I've read, she deals with some heavy topics, but she also balances that with a lot of levity and good banter and family fun. So this was a 4-star read. It was by no means a terrible book. I really love this series, and I'm glad that I read it. Sorry, I think I'm in a different position. My camera battery died again. Okay, so the next book that I read is At Gravesend by Janine Frost. This is book 3 in the Night Huntress series. This is a really fun series, and this is one of my favorite paranormal romance series of all time. I seriously freaking adore Janine Frost. I know I say this every time I mention her books, but like, seriously, I picked up this series after I had read Twilight, and I was looking for like some adult paranormal romances, and this was what I found. It was like all over. It was being so highly recommended, and I just adored it. I read as many as were out at the time, and I think that I'm very close to getting caught up to where I was at the time when they were first getting published. I think I have like 3 more books that I need to read to get caught up. Anyway, this is book number 3. This whole series is basically about a woman who is a half vampire, half human. She is also a vampire hunter, so she goes out to find what she considers to be monsters, and she kills them because they can't recognize that they don't realize that she's a vampire because she still smells like a human, and so she's really able to basically just slaughter them at will because she's powerful like a vampire, but she can sort of hide as a human too. And she ends up teaming up with a master vampire hunter named Bones. Her name is Kat, and he ends up persuading her to join him, and instead of just killing all vampires willy-nilly, he's just sort of like, how about we just go kill the bad vampires? And so that's what they do, and of course they end up falling in love. So the fun thing about this series is that each book has a very contained story, but of course they all connect together, so you really can't read this series out of order, but it's so much fun. Like, it really is like sort of a great urban fantasy and paranormal romance because, like, it's heavy on the romance. There is some steam in here. There is, like, the romance is the driving plot. Like, each book has something in there that might potentially pull Cat and Bones apart, and especially in this book, there was a very emotional scene that I had forgotten about at the very end that had me near tears because I just could feel it so vividly. I love Cat and Bones. They're one of my favorite couples, in paranormal romance or not. Like, they just have such great chemistry and they have such great banter. They're both so strong, but also, like, they lean into each other and they let each other help one another. It's just such a fun series, and I just love their romance so freaking much. In this one, we have basically, they're also teaming up with, like, humans who are trying to bring down bigger crime rings involving paranormal creatures, paranormal beings. So they're working with, like, police in this undercover unit, and Kat is pretty well known for being, like, the Red Reaper, and she's getting a name for herself and taking down vampires and other paranormal creatures. So she has been trying to, like, change her persona, like she'll dye her hair, she has red hair, and so that people don't recognize her. But the jig is finally up, and they know who she is, and they know the different type of disguises that she wears. So she's kind of endangered that way. But also their bigger overall plot in this book is actually from a very, very, very old vampire who is actually Cleopatra, who had a little bit of a tryst with Bones many centuries ago, and she's never gotten over it, and so she is out to kill and destroy Bones, and Kat is not going to let that happen, of course. I don't know, like, I feel like this series was very popular way back when, in like the early 2000s. I think that's when I read it, like this was published in 2009. I probably read it around then. It's just so much fun. It's got such great action. It's very fast paced. The stories are very compelling. Like, these books are very addicting for me. Like, I pick it up and I don't want to stop reading it until I'm done. Like, I just love it. This one is probably one of my favorites in the series that I've reread so far. I read them so long ago that as I'm going through and reading them, like, I'm remembering, oh my gosh, I forgot about that. But the overall plot, I'm sort of like, I don't remember a thing. So it's really a fun reading experience for me. I love reading these if I'm feeling a little bit slumpy, if I'm feeling kind of like I don't really know what to read. I'll just pick one of these up because I know this is a safe bet for me. This is something I'm going to get really engaged in, something I'm really going to enjoy. And this one was no different. I gave this one 5 stars. I really loved it. I think this is one of the best books in the series. It's full of emotion, angst, fast-paced, interesting characters. Something else that's really, really great about this series that Jeaniene Frost does is she has such great side characters in her books. They're super compelling. They have their own stories. They have their great personalities. They add so much to the overall book. And a lot of those side characters end up either getting their own series or a spin-off book. So that's super fun. I just enjoy the series so much. I cannot recommend it highly enough. It's a ton of fun. And if you're looking for a series to really get invested in that has a heavy romance plot, but also like a lot of fun action, it's not necessarily just action, like it's a clever plot too. Anyway, I'd highly recommend this. I love it. It's so fun. 5 out of 5 stars for this one. Okay, and the next book that I read is actually one I just made a video about last week. Last week I posted a video that was a check-in with my previous 5-star predictions, and then I was making new 5-star predictions, and one of those books that I picked was Art and Soul by Brittany C. Cherry. I love Brittany C. Cherry. She is one of my favorite contemporary romance authors. I think she does emotional, hard-hitting, like really epic love stories so well. I just adore her books so much. So Brittany C. Cherry is actually one of the main reasons that I got back into like contemporary romance. Is I found her books when they still had was it Audible Escape, their romance package where you could just listen to all romance books for free or like a really low fee. Like, I miss that so much. Anyway, she was on there with a lot of her books, and I just like went through so many of her backlists, but I did not get this one. And I believe, if you know, as far as I can tell, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but I believe this is Brittany C. Cherry's first book. So this is a contemporary romance. It was published in 2015, but I would say that this is almost, I wouldn't say that it's I don't know. It is shelved as I believe a new adult romance, but the characters in here are 16 and 17 and they remain that age for the whole book. So it's really about their lives in high school and their love story. And their love story is so sweet and beautiful. And I honestly completely bought into it. And if you've watched any of my other videos, you know, I do not love reading romance that involves teenagers. Like, I don't want to read that. That's my personal preference. I'm a 40-year-old woman. I feel like I just have a really hard time connecting with those teenage love stories. But I will say there are a few authors that I trust that can really get me on board with these very young, beautiful love stories, and Brittany C. Cherry is one of them. Like, something that she is really well known for is she will often start her romances with the characters when they're in high school, and they start out as kind of like a childhood friends to lovers. And so that's what I was expecting to happen here. Also, she doesn't really give you much info on the blurb on the back of what's going to even happen in here. But so I kept waiting. I'm like, okay, when are they going to get adults? And then they never did. So I was like, okay. But also, like, I wasn't disappointed in that at all. I felt like their story was so compelling and it was so beautiful. Like, this is a very hard-hitting book. It's basically about a young girl. She's a high school student. She's an art student, and she is sort of known for being a little bit odd, a little bit different. Like, she literally does shave the side of her head, like on the cover of this, which I think is just such a beautiful, beautiful cover. She's kind of known for being a little bit out there. She doesn't really fit in with like the regular mainstream kids at school. And she is okay with that, you know, like she's very passionate about art and everything like that. So she ends up making a choice that changes her entire life. And the choice that she makes labels her basically as a whore, a slut, and gives her this really bad reputation. And she's kind of run through the ringer at school. A new boy moves in named Levi, who is there with his father, who has a cancer diagnosis. And so he's dealing with a lot of heavy stuff. His mom has some mental health issues, Levi's mom. His dad is in the last stages of cancer, but he is just this shining, bright, beautiful boy who is full of love and full of kindness. And he sees the heroine, what's her name again? Arya. He sees Arya sort of being mistreated and mislabeled, and he befriends her, and their friendship eventually grows into love. This was just such a beautiful story. It was just so moving. It was so emotional. Like, I was on the verge of tears several times, and honestly, if this is her first book, I am extremely impressed. It was totally beautiful. It wasn't what I was expecting at all. You know, I was definitely expecting them to become adults and then to have a little bit of steam. So there's no steam in here. This is purely in their high school years, but it was still just so beautiful. Like, it was emotional, beautiful, heartfelt. I honestly really loved it, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. So this one is a 5-star read from my 5-star predictions. Oh, my family just came home. Don't mind Kazi. Okay, and the next book that I read was probably one of my favorite books that I have read in a long time. If you follow me on Instagram, you maybe know what it is, and it is The Lady Gets Lucky by Joanna Shupe. This is a historical romance. This is an arc. I received this finished copy from Avon Books. Thank you so much, Avon, for sending me this. And I have to say, I have not had great luck with very many historical romance releases this year. There have only been a few, probably 3, that I have really, really loved, that I have given 5 stars, that I wholeheartedly recommend and think they are fantastic. And I was very, very nervous about this book because this is actually Joanna Shupe's second book that she has released this year. And this is the second in this series. The first book was a miss for me. I did not like it at all. I gave it 3 stars because, I mean, Joanna Shupe still has a gift for getting me very invested in her stories. She's a really great storyteller. But again, the ending, she never really sticks that ending for me. So the first book in this was a miss. It was a 3-star for me. So I was very, very cautious going in here. I've talked also about how I sometimes have a complicated relationship with Joanna Shupe, and that there are always aspects of her books that I love. But there are also almost always something that happens in the ending that I'm just like, I wish that had ended differently, and I get so disappointed. So I was nervous about this, and I started reading it, and I was in love with it. And this book took me like 2 weeks to read. And it's not because it wasn't good. It's honestly just because I was enjoying it so much, and I was so anxious that I was not going to love the ending, and so I kept like dragging it out. And I was telling my friends, Jen and Jess, and I was like, I love it so much, but I'm so scared about the ending. Like, I'm so scared about the ending. So let me assure you, the ending delivered for me. This book was fantastic. This book right here is my favorite historical romance release of 2021. I loved it. I loved it so freaking much. 5 stars. This is going to be on my top reads of the year list. I freaking adored this book. It was just so good. It had such great chemistry. It had such great character development. It had such a beautiful, sweet, swoony romance. And the steam in here was top-notch. Joanna Shupe, I think she does steam exceptionally well, especially for historical. She gives her heroines a lot of desire, which I really, really love seeing in historicals too. I just love this book so freaking much. So let me tell you a little bit about what it's about, because it's really sort of a quiet plot. There's not a huge plot that's happening here, but there's so much that is progressing the relationship and moving it forward, and also moving these characters' lives forward. I just Loved it so much. I loved it so much. Okay, so our hero is Kit. He is really sort of like a rake, even though this is set in the Gilded Age. He's sort of well known as a ladies' man. He's extremely handsome. He's known for being a beautiful face, but maybe a little bit dim. And our heroine is Alice, and she is sort of known as a little bit of a wallflower. She has a very overbearing mother. She is sort of quiet, keeps to herself, and she has come to the realization that she has to marry to get out from underneath her overbearing mother. And so she approaches Kit very quietly. They're both at this getaway that they were in the first book with a bunch of friends. And she approaches him and she asks him for lessons in seduction on how to secure a husband. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. You are a good girl. You don't need me in your life. But he wants to start a supper club, and he's having a little bit of a hard time getting a really well-known chef to come and work for him. And so Alice knows this, and she says, well, how about this? How about you give me one seduction lesson, and then I give you one of this famous chef's recipes that you want, because Alice really loves cooking. She wants to be a chef. She really, really loves cooking. But however, that's something that is not seen ladies do at this time. Like, ladies were not chefs. They were not in the kitchen. They were not cooking. So it's sort of been in secret that she's been taking lessons and learning how to cook from the famous chef that Kit actually wants to hire for his supper club. So when Kit finds that out, he agrees, and they decide to have seduction lessons. And let me tell you, these seduction lessons were so fantastic. Like, the chemistry was off the charts. There was so much desire between these two. And she does something in here that I really, really love, where Kit doesn't think he's going to be very attracted to her. And then when he teaches her how to, like, seduce a man, like licking sugar off her finger, he is literally dying and just about to spontaneously combust with his desire for this woman. But also they have, like, so many great moments in these lessons where they're just getting to know each other and their friendship is evolving. And it's just a beautiful thing to watch. Both of them realize that this person is the person they want to be with. I just loved it. I loved it so much. It was absolutely beautiful. There was just way too many sweet, swoony, fantastic, not way too many. There can never be too many, but it was just so good, you guys. It was so romantic. It was so swoony. It was just perfect. I loved it. 5 out of 5 stars. This is probably actually a 6-star read for me. I haven't quite decided for sure or not, but, like, I deeply love this and recommend this. This comes out October 26th, so if you're looking for a new historical, pick this one up. Okay, and the last book that I read is actually a continuation in the Deliver Us series by Pam Godwin, and the last book that I read is Take. So this is actually a bind-up. This series has 9 books in it. These are dark romance books. These are very, very dark, exceptionally dark. If you think you have a trigger warning, like, it's probably in here. These books are extremely dark. They're very kinky. They're very taboo, but they're also deeply, deeply, deeply emotional. They really, really make you think about how relationships actually work, how something that we would consider to be a very dysfunctional, unhealthy relationship, how it actually might work for 2 very damaged people. And I just love that so much about these books. So I'm going to hold this up. This is the second bind up. The book that I read is book number 5, right? Yes. So I read Take, which is the 5th out of 9 books. So you can actually also buy these individually. So here is what the individual cover looks like, which is definitely more of a tell that this is a dark romance than that beautiful cover was, although I love both of the covers. So this book follows Kate, who is actually who we have met in a previous book where she was bought for sex trafficking purposes, and she was trained to please men in all ways. She is still a virgin, which is pretty common for in these books that would remain intact so that they would be able to sell them for a higher price. She was freed as a sex slave, and she's been working sort of behind the scenes to bring this ring of sex trafficking down. And in doing so, she ends up getting kidnapped by Tiago. Tiago we have met in previous books. He is our hero in this book, but he is very much an anti-hero. He is a little bit of a villain turned hero, and I have to say there are few things that I enjoy more than a truly morally gray, dark, twisted hero who ends up falling for the heroine. Like, I really, really love that, and that is exactly what happened here. But it was a very, very slow, rocky, dangerous road to get there. Tiago ends up kidnapping Kate and keeping her, and Tiago is a very complicated person. He has had some very tragic things happen in his life, and directly because of those things that have happened in his life, he has developed, or he has seen awaken within him, both coping mechanisms and things that excite him and things that he enjoys. And all of those things are very dark. They are very twisted. Like, he finds beauty and art and also self-soothing and self-healing by cutting scars into himself and into other people. And it's not anything that is ever like a haphazard thing. Like, the scars that he cuts into people are a form of art in his mind, and it honestly, like, I feel like I'm not describing this series justice. I'm not describing this to give it justice, because on paper, when you think about the triggers in here, sexual assault, kidnapping, cutting, suicide, like their murder, there are some very dark things that are happening here. And not just dark things that happen in their sexual lives, but dark things that are just happening around them. But the way that Pam Godwin describes what is happening in these characters' lives, and the way that she describes their thought processes, the way that she describes how they feel and how they see and view things in the world, and how they are in this situation where they are really in a dark place. And they have to survive. And so they've developed these coping mechanisms and also ways to still find joy. But to someone who isn't living that type of life, all that they would see is depravity and just despicableness, you know? So it's a really, honestly, my favorite part of these books are very steamy, but it's not the steam that's my favorite part. My favorite part of these books is really seeing into these characters' minds and seeing how they think. She does such a great job. Not any single one of these characters is repeated. Like, none of their attributes are exact. Like, all of her characters are very unique. They have very different healing processes. They have very different trauma responses. They have very different thought processes, and they have a different way of viewing the world. And it's just such an interesting thing. Like, I think the thing that I say the most often about Pam Godwin is it really blows my mind how she is able to create such villainous characters that do such evil and despicable things. But she's also really able to get you to see things from their point of view and to not immediately write it off as disgusting or harmful. Like, I think that these books create such a space to really allow you to think differently about how other people live their lives. And I feel like in general, that's something that I really love about romance, is how it really allows you to get a glimpse at people who live and feel differently from you and to develop empathy for them. And I think that is exactly what is happening here. And I know that it probably sounds really, really weird when I'm talking about someone who literally kidnapped this woman, you know, and is cutting her and is doing some really despicable things, not only in this book, but in the book previously. But, so, like, I'm not saying the things that happen in this book are okay. Like, I want that to be clear. I am not endorsing dark romance themes as something that should happen in real life. But what I am saying is that she has really created a way of allowing you to see things in a different point of view that might allow you to understand how somebody feels and thinks that is completely different from yours. From somebody who has gone through things that you will never go through. Or hopefully you won't, you know? Like, I just really, really love them. And the thing that I especially loved about this book, in case I didn't say it, I gave this book 5 stars. This book was phenomenal. I loved it. It was fantastic. This one is probably my second favorite in the series. My first is always going to be Van's Story, Vanquish. I love that book so much. This is definitely second to that. I loved watching this really dark, really sort of vile villainous hero. I loved watching him, just seeing all of the layers unwrapped from him and seeing what makes him tick and why he does what he does, and realizing his motivations are different than I thought that they were, and watching him fall in love with Kate was beautiful. This is the dark romance that I love. This is dark romance that I live for. Everything in here is done with subtlety. It's done with such care. It's done with such thoughtful decisions of what she's going to include and how that's all going to lead you to the final act of both of them being in love. Like, It just blows my mind. Honestly, these books are mind-boggling. If you enjoy dark romance, you would really love this series if you can handle the trigger warnings, because like I said, they are very, 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 very much a lot of them, and they could be pretty heavy. And I will say there was definitely a specific kink in this book that I do not like, but I loved the story so much. I was just sucked in and captivated by these very damaged people trying to find some happiness. And that's what this whole series is about. And I just love it. I love it so much. So 5 stars for this one. Really fantastic. If you enjoy dark romance, you really should read this because it's phenomenal. So those are the books that I read this week. I read 5 books. Hope you enjoyed listening to me talk about them. And yeah, I think that out of all, I recommend all of these books. I didn't really have any books this week that I was like, oh man, I hated that. Like, I had a few nitpicky issues with, like, I think I gave all of these books, yeah. I gave 4 out of 5 of these books 5 stars. So that is an excellent reading week, and I'm just very, very happy about that. So thank you so much for watching this video, my friends. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to leave me an emoji down below, how about you leave me a pumpkin one? And for Halloween. So thanks for watching. I'll see y'all in my next video.